Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode. I want to start today's video by thanking you guys for the support you've given me on the last few videos. I didn't really expect the videos on the Audi A100 to receive such positive comments and so much views. So I want to thank you guys for your support and I want to welcome the new people to the channel. And today's video will kind of continue the Audi videos because we still have to do some buttoning up on the car. And I'm also going to update you guys on if it passed inspection or not, and that is kind of a sad story. But first I'm going to update you guys on the workshop because that has changed drastically since the last time you've seen it.
All my friends, yellow rider.
The past few weeks my dad and I have been working non-stop to make sure that the cars have some shelter for the upcoming winter. I documented the full construction of the workshop and as soon as the build is finalized, I will post a video about it. But since I will be making videos in the shop before it is finished, I might as well give you guys a small update. The structure of the building is fully built and the roof has already been made waterproof, so that is already a lot more pleasant to work in. In the next couple of days my dad and I are going to focus on finishing the walls, so that the shop is windproof as well. So as you can see, the shop is a big mess. That is because we don't have any walls yet and the wind is just blowing in here freely. There's a storm coming over in Belgium this weekend and it has been raining pretty bad last night and that is why it is wet in here. So before the guys get here, I'll clean this mess up and I'll also have to remove this piece of scaffolding so that the cars can come in here. And then when that is done, we can do some proper work on the cars. It took me about an hour to clear everything up and it was right on time because in the distance I heard the sound of a sooty diesel approaching. Arno pulled up in his E34 525 TDS to help us work on Dimitri today. If there is time left, we might also take a look at the exhaust system of this car, since it recently fell off and it was fixed on the side of the road. But our main focus is to do some work on Tibo's Audi A100. In the previous episode you saw us fixing this car so that it could pass technical inspection. So you might be wondering if it passed or not. Well, the answer is yes, it did pass technical inspection and it even did it without any remarks. But the whole process didn't go very smoothly. In the previous episode you saw us painting the lowering springs that were on the car when we bought it. This to avoid that they would stand out during the technical inspection as they are illegal in Belgium. But our efforts were for nothing because the worker at the inspection station noticed that the pitch of the springs wasn't original, so he rejected the car. This means that Tibo had to buy original springs and that we had to install it on the car, and that is why Dimitri now looks like a monster truck. And to make things worse, the car had to go through a special inspection where the wheel geometry could be measured, since this has to be done when a car's ride height has been altered. All of this bureaucratic mess was time and money consuming, but after weeks of suffering, Dimitri is finally registered and insured. But our journey with the car is not over yet. We want to do some things to the cooling system of Dimitri, but the car is still hot from getting here, from driving here. So we're going to start with taking care of the sound system because it has some issues with that. Ever since Tibo bought this car, we noticed that the audio quality of the sound system leaves a lot to be desired. So today we are going to try to enhance our listening experience by installing a little friend Tibo brought with him in the back seat. It is a Kenwood subwoofer with a max output of 1200 watts that we are going to install in the trunk of Dimitri to spice up his audio system. In addition to the subwoofer, we are also going to replace the rear speakers because they pop and crackle. But we're starting with the install of the sub. The trunk is big enough to house a small family, so there will be plenty of room left once this blast cannon is in here. To install this thing we need to run several wires into the trunk. So we are going to take out part of the seats so that we have enough room to push everything through. We quickly found a crevice that could support all the wires we need to pull through, so we can start with the first cable, which is the positive power. We start with taking out the battery for obvious reasons. Behind it sits a little rubber grommet that is ideal for us to feed the cable through. We are putting a 30 amp fuse between the power cable so that we don't fry anything when there is a short. And then next we are tucking the power wire under the body trim so that it is hidden and protected. I stole 2 skewers out of my mom's fondue set and bent them in a way that makes them ideal for this kind of job.
Yes.
While Tibo is taking care of tucking the wire away, we are going to take out the rear speakers in order to replace them. I've never seen speakers this blown in my life, so it's a good thing that we are going to replace them. I had a pair of these speakers laying around that once were installed in my Golf. They are the exact diameter of Dimitri's original speakers, so they are a perfect replacement. While Arno takes care of soldering and installing the rear speakers, Tibo and me are continuing with the cable install. We pulled through the power wire, so now we are going to worry about the RCA cable with a built-in remote cable. It needs to be installed in the back of the radio, so I got another set of special tools in order for us to take out the radio.
Yes. Daar moet de mine subwoofer hier.
We noticed that there wasn't a power source behind the radio that would switch off once the ignition is off. But then it made sense why a random toggle switch is next to the radio. The previous owner probably installed that switch to manually turn the radio on and off. Weirdly, the switch was not plugged in, so we connected it back to switch the power for the radio and the subwoofer.
Yes.
Then we routed the RCA cable and the remote signal to the trunk in the same way as we did with the positive power cable. The last thing we need to do is mount the amplifier to a sturdy piece of metal so that it doesn't bounce around when Dimitri is pulling 3 G's in a corner. Then we can finally strap down the sub, hook it up to the amplifier, and then hope we connected everything correctly. So now let's see if we improve the sound system or not.
Batterij.
Oh, batterij.
Op de E40 richting kust zijn in Jabbeke de rechter- en de middenrijstrook afgesloten.
Wat kijk er hier nog? Ah, dat is de radio
Als
gewoon.
file vanaf het pad.
A resonating number plate is a good sign that there is a sufficient amount of bass in the system, so I'd say the job is done.
So the subwoofer is done on the M3 and I can vouch for it, it is ear-piercing loud. So now that that is done, we are going to do something to the coolant system because we had some issues with that on the last episode, but I'll tell you guys the whole story in a couple of seconds.
It looks like there are some rain clouds approaching, so I think we need to move the M3 in the shop if we want to stay dry. So, what is wrong with the M3's cooling system? In the last episode you saw us drain the coolant and install a new water pump and a new thermostat. Later that night, before we wanted to do our test drive, we filled up the car with coolant and tried bleeding the system. But every time we did this we had the issue that the coolant would start to boil really bad before the thermostat would open. So we thought our new thermostat was stuck, preventing a flow, so we took it out and put the original one back in, but this gave us the same result. By then it was 2 AM, so we were sick of working in the rain, so we just took out the thermostat completely, which fixed the boiling issue we had. That is when we went on our first test drive and the cooling system worked perfectly. Then off camera Tibo has tried many other thermostats, each time with the same result. So the only conclusion that we could draw is that a giant air pocket would form around the thermostat, preventing it from opening, which means that eventually the water in the engine would start to boil without any flow being possible. But today we think we might have found a solution to this problem, so we are going to start with installing a thermostat again. Oh This time it is Arno's turn to hold the bucket while getting showered in coolant.
Oh my god. Kom dan terug gewoon, back op.
Ja?
Ja. Waar is hij nou bakketje?
Wacht. Houden we hem er wel lager.
As you can see, there is no thermostat in the car at the moment. So it's time to select the thermostat and then throw it in.
Ogen dicht, hè?
Ja, ze zijn dicht.
Ja, doe maar.
Dat is een originele.
So now we need to fill it up with coolant again, and hopefully this time we can manage to bleed the system properly. And today we have a trick up our sleeves. This is a vacuum coolant fill kit. Basically what it does is sucking out all the air in the cooling system and then replacing it with coolant. That way no air pockets will sit around the thermostat so that it can open when it should.
Zo. Dat erop. Dan de...
Before we can start the bleeding process, we are going to mix up 7 liters of coolant, which is the prescribed amount that should go in. Then we hook up the bleeder to the air hose of my air compressor, and then we can start pulling a vacuum.
Zie. Ik moet een vacuüm trekken.
Oh ja, dat zie je, mannen.
Hoeveel vacuüm zou ik pakken?
Ik denk dat het niet meer als deze.
Ik denk dat dat is, hè.
Oké, nu staat het systeem onder vacuüm blijven staan. Dat is goed, dat is teken dat hem niet lekt. En nu...
Dat is wel gaaf.
Okay. It is really cool to see this work, but we did notice that something was not right. Normally you should be able to suck in the full amount of coolant needed in one go, but we only managed to get 4 liters in there. We did it a couple of times and we managed to get 5 liters in there, but that was it. We don't really know what we did wrong. Maybe my air compressor couldn't pull a sufficient vacuum, maybe the filler is faulty, maybe the coolant system is leaky, who knows. If you guys have an idea, please let us know in the comments. We actually never managed to get as much coolant in the car as we have now, so we're going to start the car to see if the thermostat manages to open. After some time the coolant started to boil again like the last time. So now we are trying to make a coolant bleeding funnel to hopefully squeeze out as much air as we can. But after a while the coolant started to boil again.
Echt volgedaan.
Holy shit. Te wegstaan. Wat de hel, man.
But then suddenly it sounded like Dimitri took a hit from the bong. So we decided to try once more because we have the impression that a big air bubble might have come out. Finally the thermostat opened and we have a flow going through the system, which means that the cooling is dialed. Now let's take him for a gentle test drive to see if everything is okay, and then we can move on to working on the next car.
Ah, wacht Tibo.
Now I want to do some work on my Audi. I suspect it might have a boost leak and the vacuum filler gave me an idea to test if it is the case. The plan is to use the rubber cone we used earlier and to put it on my intake. That way we can put some pressure on the intake using compressed air. But first I need to find a spot on my intake where I can put the cone. The hole coming from my turbo is way too big, so we will have to find another spot. Tibo has the idea to take off one of the hoses from the crankcase ventilation system and then to put the cone in that. So we are going to put the cone in this hole while somebody keeps his hand on the intake of the turbo so that the air doesn't escape.
Nee, wacht hoor. Ja.
Wel relaxed, hè?
Hoe heb ik aan het fitten?
Rustig.
I quickly found a sizable leak coming from the swirl flaps.
Ik weet niet dat je dat gaat kunnen zien, maar... Ja, maar direct goed. Ja. Dan maak je het achter wat dat ondergespreid stuk komt.
Nee, ik zie het.
I also found a leak coming from one of the pipes that runs between my front intercoolers. So it is safe to say that my car is losing some power and this can also be the source of the smoke I see when I accelerate. So I've got some work to do on this car. But there is nothing we can really do about it now, so let's draw on the last car on the lift. Recently, Arno lost the exhaust of his E34 when he was driving on some of the awful roads Belgium has to offer. And he had to perform a bush fix on the side of the road because he couldn't get his exhaust back in its hanger, so that needs addressing first. It also seems like one of the other hangers took a big hit, so Tibo is bending it back. So that is everything scratched of our to-do list for today, and it is the end of today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and if you did, please consider subscribing. And I think in the next video, it's time we start working on the BMW again. Until next time.